Welcome, bienvenue. My name is Renee Ketchum, and I curate cultural offerings for AFUSA, and I'm thrilled and honored to welcome Cara Black to speak about From Aimée Leduc to Huguette, Cara Black's post-war Paris book, Huguette. AFUSA is the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 26,000 learners of French each year to learn French, live French, and love French. And please see our video. We would like to encourage all of you to attend some of our upcoming national events, including tomorrow's first in a series of 3 Notre Dame de Paris, followed by Dory's Anytime Cakes. If you like to bake, it's an extraordinary cookbook, and she'll be with us to talk about her book. A continuation of Notre Dame, and then we will be speaking about Nouvelle Vague, the new film by Richard Linklater with Peter de Bruges on December 15th. A few logistics and format. Please stay on mute during the presentation. Stay on speaker view. Please put all of your questions in the chat and we'll get to them following our conversation with Cara. If there are technical issues, sign back in after a couple of minutes using the original Zoom link. This event is being recorded for our YouTube channel and the total runtime is 1 hour. I am so thrilled to welcome back, reintroduce Cara Black, who I think we all know. Cara is the author of 21 books in the New York Times bestselling Aimée Leduc series, as well as the World War II thrillers 3 Hours in Paris and Night Flight to Paris. Cara has won the Médaille de la Ville de Paris and the Médaille d'Or de Rayonnement Culturel de la Renaissance. Her books have been translated into German, Norwegian, Japanese, French, Spanish, Italian, and Hebrew. And she also has had multiple nominations for the Anthony and Macavity Awards. Welcome, Cara.
Hi, Renee. Thank you. Bienvenue, everyone.
So let's start our conversation today with what inspired you to write Huguette, and why now? Was there a particular story idea from post-war France and that gave you the idea? And what were some of the challenges?
Sure. I found a quote in a book, and I'd just like to read this first because I think it just sort of sets the tone of what Huguette faced. It's the quote is, "But people cannot choose their time. They are caught in it, and it can break over them with all the violence of a tidal wave." That's by Countess Ingeborg Kalnoky in her book, The Guest House. She was a Hungarian countess who wrote an amazing story. And I thought that quote sort of put it all into place for what my character, Huguette, faces. She was inspired by a shadowy character in my Aimée Leduc crime fiction books. Aimée Leduc is a detective. And in some of the books, there is a reference, never named, to a woman who was her grandfather, Claude Leduc's mistress. And sometimes Aimée is taken to a cafe. She's sitting on the banquette doing her homework, and her grandfather disappears for a little while, and then he comes back later. Many years later, she finds out that he was visiting his mistress upstairs. So I always wondered, who is she? Most of my stories start with a what if, but it was like, who is this woman? When did she grow up? How did she meet Claude Leduc? So that sort of was, the inspiration. I didn't know who she was, and it was real challenge. And I think it made this book quite different. It's a standalone from my crime fiction series. And
I think we have some pictures that we were going to.
Sure. This is also one of the pictures that inspired me. It was taken at Liberation 1944 in Paris. On the left, which is hard to see, where can you see there's a figure with a bicycle? Then there's a woman a bit further down with a white dress. And beyond her is German soldiers raising their arms in surrender. And the street they're on is Rue Saint-Honoré, if you can believe it. And the building to the left is the Church of Saint Roch. And I saw this and I was looking, and then I realized behind, you can see the women who were leaning out of the windows right there above the coiffure shops. And there's another coiffure. So I thought, how interesting. Women rushed to the coiffure because maybe they had a hot water and got their hair done because the occupiers were leaving and new faces were going to be on the horizon, the American GIs. And I just thought, I've never seen a photo like this where we see the Germans retreating on a street that maybe many of us have gone and shopped and bought perfume on or chocolates. And here are the women leaning out the window, trying to get gussied up for the next group of people. So this was an inspiration and it stayed on the screen top of my computer. It's, for 3 years. And I always kept thinking about that. I think we have another. Here is the same view, albeit not from the same angle, of the street today. You see the carousel behind. On the left is the Saint Roch, where the people are walking, and you could see the woman with the bicycle. And above the awning on the right side would have been those coiffures where the women were leaning out of the window. So then and now, I just really tried to think of it like that. And also, what inspired my story was a visit to this dentist on the right. When my husband was driving me to the plane, to the airport to catch a plane to Paris, I felt something and a filling dropped out of my mouth into my hand. I caught it, thank God, put it in a baggie, and knew that how could I go to France and have, a filling missing? How could I eat? So my friend, right away when I got there, I begged her, "Do you have a dentist?" She said, "Oh, sure, my dentist. He's wonderful. He's in Boulogne-Billancourt, if you don't mind, like a 45-minute metro ride. He'll take you. I'll call him up." And so I was saved and got to go to this dentist who actually loves New York. Those are his pictures. He was very proud of them. Was fantastic. He put my filling back in. I walked out of the dentist and past this studio Boulogne, and I thought, wow, this is where there's the Canal Studios. There's all these film studios here, and I discovered that this area, because it had a lot of space, was the center of the film industry. There were several studios there. So I started thinking about that. And I thought I need to know more about this area. So I think in our next slide, we'll see more of Boulogne-Billancourt, which I discovered with my friend Françoise, who might be with us today. We started, because she lives in Boulogne-Billancourt, she said, she took me around. She's with the Paris Greeters. And we discovered some places. And as I was developing the story, I was thinking, where would a character live? What places would they be? And when we discovered this, I was like, this shows Boulogne when it was a village. And these are still here today. You can see the ancient well. I just fell in love with that. And our character lives there. He lives up this street. We can see the other side of the well here. And I thought this was a village, and you can still see the remnants of it. So I knew characters had to live there. They had to walk those cobblestones. And I thought Huguette would definitely have to come here. And our next slide. Also, I discovered with Françoise the abandoned Chateau Rothschild. Um, it was owned by one of the Rothschilds, and they hosted lavish parties. And they left just before the war started. The Germans took it over, requisitioned it, and when the Germans left, the Americans took it over. And what we can't see right here, but where the grassy area is, it's huge and it goes down to a lake. And that's where the GIs pitched their tents. It was like this whole area dotted all with army tents where the GIs lived. There was a US supply depot near there. And behind, if we keep going from where the grass is part of a forest. A lot of it is gone now because they built the Périphérique, the ring road that goes around Paris. But that shows that this was really, it's on the outskirts of Paris and it was like a village. So if you go here today, it's got scaffolding because they're building remodeling and doing a luxury hotel. But good luck with that. Look at that roof. So that was an inspiration. And it all comes from the first place where I started writing, Duc Detective, which inspired me. Of course, the name is changed to Leduc Detective. And in the story, we see Claude Leduc, who's Amy's grandfather, and his origin as a detective. We see him starting his agency. And I had a lot of fun with that scene because when we've met Claude Leduc later, he's her grandfather, but we see him just having the luck to find this great office space. And he's sitting on the wood floor because he has no furniture, of course. He's just starting out. He's just left the police force. And so he has to go, and he becomes a great person who he loves to find a bargain. He'll go to the auction houses and he'll buy the furniture and furnish the Duke Detective. And this is where Aimée Leduc now works. So that gives us, oh, and so when I was in Paris, I came back about 2 weeks ago. I did have a copy of Huguette, and I went to the Café du Soleil. Some of you know it probably. It's on the Ile de la Cité, right across right by the river, which is just beyond that window. And this, to me, was Huguette's Cafe, which will feature in the story. And I had been there before, and it's a haunt of les flics, the police. And they go in there and they hang out. And I talked to the waiters look how young they are. I said, "Oh, do you remember?" And they're like, "No, sorry, we don't really know the history." But I started to tell them about the story and about how I use this as the basis for Huguette's Cafe. And the owners did used to live upstairs, which I think is so French because people lived above their businesses when they could. And cafe life, which in the story we'll see Huguette grew up in the cafe. And it's a great way to tell a story because you see the locals from the neighborhood, the flower seller from around the corner. And so I was thrilled to actually bring Huguette back home to her cafe.
Thank you so much for these great slides. And as I said to Cara, I wanted to tell all the readers, all the people on this Zoom, just keep your eye out for dentist. If you're your own detective, there's a wonderful clue with no spoilers. Anyway, thank you again so much for those slides and giving us the background for this really extraordinary story. So the novel deals with very complex issues like survival versus mortality, revenge with a capital R versus redemption, and preservation versus guilt. Were there moments when you debated sort of what should Huguette do without giving anything away in the context of post-World War II France?
Sure, Renee. It's something I thought a lot about. And it was a constant dilemma for the character of Huguette. So we start off, she's 17 years old, grew up in this cafe. She's went to Catholic school. So she's, of course, has these, sort of Catholic morals. And she deals with a lot of issues that really go against that. But she's also, we find out, a survivor. And she's got to use what she can do, any skills she has, which is she's very good at numbers because she used to run the till in the cafe and balance the books. And about what would you do, what should you do, maybe in the traditional way, but given that this was a very uncertain time at liberation, there were so many events beyond her control, and she was thrust into them. Her father was accused, and maybe rightfully so, of collaboration of her helping him. And she was thrust into this. She was accused. When her father was taken by vigilantes, she was hunted. She was on the run. So, your moral choices get kind of gray when you want to survive, when you want to round the corner and get away from the people chasing you. So there's a lot of hard choices she has to make. What she might have done in, different times would be different. And of course, she comes from that sort of moral code, dutiful daughter, a hard worker, helping the family, yet betrayed in some aspects, and dealing with that and with family that you don't know that you can trust anymore. So there was a constant back and forth, which I think, is something that helped me bring out her character more. What should she do, or what would she have done given these circumstances? And what would you do now? An orphan, she's also pregnant. Um, your choices are much more limited
So,
sometimes.
sort of on that same vein, a lot happens to this character in her life. You get transitions from a pregnant teenager as a victim, a horrible victim of World War II, to of wartime abuse, to a convent in this seedy, and then she moves to this sort of seedy underworld of the black market in World War II, and then to a film studio job, sort of in a nutshell. She obviously has many other things that happen in her life, but that is how I saw it in a nutshell. How much of her character is grounded in documented realities of post-war France? I mean, like the black market economics, like opportunities for women, interestingly enough, post-war cinema.
Sure. Well, there was a definite black market. It had existed during the war and it existed after because rationing continued. That's true. I mean, 8 years, 10 years after the war, everything was rationed, not only food, but cloth. There was no leather for shoes, so people wore wooden clogs or put canvas on their shoes. The farm machinery, and we're talking about France when it was definitely a very rural economy, had been the farm machinery, all the metal had been melted by the Germans for ammunition or arms. So you've got a rural economy where the farmers don't have their tractors anymore, and they're depending on food. There is also electricity shortages, the infrastructure is damaged. So everyone was affected by this. And the coldest winter it broke a record, I believe, was 1944 and 1945. And I think it was 44. And I would just read a quote from Lee Miller, the American uh, woman who was a model, who was a war correspondent, friend of Pablo Picasso, very was one of the, was in the surrealist circles with Man Ray. But Lee Miller became a photographer for Vogue in at the end of the war and post-war France. And she says, in Lee Miller's words about this winter, there is literally no light since there has not been enough coal to make electricity for weeks, Lee writes. Candles are a fabulous treasure. It may be very gracious to dine by candlelight and hardy to bathe in cold water, but no soap in the black market and no fuel week after week gets pretty grim. So, Lee was living it. And if you can imagine, I mean, the French won the war. And is this winning the war, So a lot of people were facing, this is a photograph, Lee Miller's photograph, which we are putting up here. I mean, look at how beautiful that looks, romantic. The Eiffel Tower is bathed in this mist. But just think if you're that man who's lucky to have an umbrella and you get home and your shoes are soaked, how are you going to dry them? It looks beautiful, but they were living under these conditions. And so I also think talking about women, I found in my research, which I hadn't known, that married women in France, could not have their own checking account. They couldn't write a check. And so I thought about that, and I thought because Huguette is going to be dealing with money, she needs her own bank account. French women could not write a check. And just think about their husbands who were prisoners of war for 4 years. How are you going to raise your children, run a household? I mean, just think about things like that. And of course, a lot of the women did the work that needed to be done, not only raising families, but they had to, earn money, right, to buy whatever they could. So it was very different when the men came back, and now there were complex issues too, coming back to a family, children he might not, who didn't remember him, or they might not even know, and whatever, mental damage he might have suffered, and dealing with that. And yet now her husband needs to take a job and she needs to, not work because that's traditional. So, there were a lot of things that women had to deal with. And also in the film world, what was fascinating is that, France made films during the war. Sorry, that's my dog. Shh, he's just greeting someone who came inside. I'm sorry. So talking about the film industry, how they kept going, how they kept going during the war, post-war, it was a constant struggle. But France was living with a fragmented infrastructure, and Germany was basically a ruin. The British were also on rationing, trying to deal with, the remnants of the Blitz. So all over Europe, this was this was a reality, a harsh reality.
Yeah, and I think with your description, with your answer to that question, you also covered the answer to the whole issue of women's resilience. I'm curious, in writing this book, was the character of Huguette fully formed from the beginning, or did she slowly reveal herself as you may have lost a tooth or taken a walk on a side street?
She never arrived fully formed at all. As I said, I knew a mistress existed, and I'm not a writer who writes by outline. Probably I've said this many times. But I go somewhere in the place. Really, there's something about walking the ground, being there, and finding or seeing that little detail, or turning the corner into some place that, like I did with Françaises in Boulogne-Billancourt, into that lane, or finding that beautiful well. I mean, who would even imagine that? That really inspires a place, and also that gives me a place for the character to be. But forming a character is revealed by conflict. So instead of telling the reader, oh, she did this, you show by the issue, the obstacle that she's dealing with. And especially in Huguette's case, stakes are very high. Is she going to survive? Is she going to be found out? I mean, who's going to realize who she really is? Will they catch her? She's dealing with all of this and trying to stay with a roof over her head and some food because she's penniless or penniless, centimeless. She has nothing. And so it forces her to think on her feet as well as she can. And giving her these problems, brings out also her skill set. What has she got? You know, she's good with numbers. Her mother always taught her, how to balance the books. Her mother taught her how to do this or that, or ordering, or you do this, running a cafe, you learn many skills. So it's about helping her adapt her skill to the situation she finds herself in. And I realized that at 17, and Huguette would be more open to learning, and she realizes she needs to learn the new rules of whatever situation she's in, whether it's, helping Louis de Jouvenel, the film director, and learning how things operate in the film studio, to how you can adapt and how she can get through till the next day.
And she does indeed do that and think out of the box in her journey. What questions about Huguette's past, her past, her history, and her whole past in the book, do you hope that readers will continue to consider after finishing the novel?
Well, also, Huguette was 17 years old, a minor, under French law when the story starts and all these issues she has to deal with. And she also was like a young woman. I mean, I thought of myself when I was 17. A lot of us can. What was it like? You'd like your hair to be clean. You'd like, to go to the coiffure. You'd like to get a new dress instead of waiting 2 more years for a clothing rationing. You're a young woman as well. And also she falls in love. And there is a love story here, which happens, despite no matter during war, during conflict, you people fall in love, people have families, and that's also a healing or a growing um, option. So I would hope that we could, if someone read the book and said, well, I wonder, they could find something to relate to, whether relating to really difficult choices, life-changing choices, where you have two choices, neither of them are ones you like or would like to choose from. Morally repugnant, maybe both of them, but which one, it's almost like that saying, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. And forced continually to have to choose. Because while she seems powerless, she does have an inner strength which she's learning to discover. And I hope other people can relate to that in whatever circumstance they are, and that really propels them on their journey. It's not something she chose, but she learns. And I think learning adaptation. Okay, I don't want to be here. I don't like this, but I've got to put one foot ahead of me. And then after I take that step, take the next step. You know, it's and getting through it.
And she does. I'm curious, Cara, do you view the setting, albeit post-war Paris and France, as a character in the novel? And what atmosphere from this time period did you want your readers to really feel and understand? Did writing Huguette influence you in any way in how you look at and understand modern France?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting question. It definitely was a character in the story that time. I read, and I think Renee, you and I have talked about this previously. We read a lot of, women historical fiction set in World War II. I love those books. I think you have a fondness as well. I love that time, but there's also, just as important, I want to know what happened after. How did France change? Did it change? How did people cope? Um, and how is the France that I see when I go today, reflected in the past. And of course, in Paris, you can't get away from the past, not that you want to, but there is that. And I think that time was special. And I wanted to write about that because I wasn't finding in all the historical fiction, I wasn't finding anyone writing or very much written in English about that time. And I wanted to read about that time. When I went to Lyon, which was great because, of course, research, and I got to have wonderful quenelles, their giant seafood sausage with lobster sauce. Oh, it was delicious. Um, I I thought, it's very easy for, at least for me, when I go out at night and I walked around Lyon in the old section and, with the traboules, those long courtyards that are connected to the next street, very kind of Renaissance Italian style. And, um, and of course, very atmospheric, the famous film of the clockmaker, the watchmaker,
Mm-hmm.
watch repair with Philippe Noiret, made by Bertrand Tavernier. Right there, I could walk that, and it looks like it looked in the film. And I could walk those streets and feel it didn't look any different. The shops are shuttered, the signs were different, but I could feel that time, and I could feel what it was like, during the war, which in Lyon was a huge resistance hub, which I found out about. And but what happened to those resistance after the war? What was it like? What was Huguette goes to Lyon for certain connections, and what happened to all the cinemas? How was it, then? And so many had closed. And so I think that was really interesting because French, as we all know, love cinema. It's the birthplace of cinema, where the first films were made. And the Lumiere brothers, in Lyon, and I got to go to the museum. And gets to go there as well before it's a museum, and to a board meeting. And it's a place that the past resonates. And I thought, what was it like, after the war? How did people cope? Again, when you don't have coal, when, candles are a luxury, and that would inform, if you grew up as a child, you wouldn't, electricity might not be the first thing you remember, And what was that like? How did that form the next generation? And I think there's also intergenerational guilt. The people who lived through the war survived, the war, and they had also maybe, and I'm not speaking for the French here. This is just what I'm thinking, but survivor guilt, shame at living under an occupation where you were hamstrung, because your choices were limited. If you had a family, if you had a sick grandparent living with you, what can you do, against the Germans when you've got to put food on the table and nurse a sick grandparent? Your choices were limited. And, how did that affect those after the war? And why did people not want to talk about the war for many years? I think people did not want to revisit it. They wanted to move on. It's not called, they didn't call it PTSD then, post-traumatic stress. So I hope I answered some of that question, but
Yeah, and I think also you and I have spoken recently about how many books there are on this period in history in different contexts, but people I think are still feeling maybe it's cathartic, maybe it's a way to to remember and erase at the same time. I don't know, but it's a topic that continues to resurface. One of the things that's so fascinating about your books is the detail. Um, if you've been to Paris, if you've been, as you've just described, Lyon, I mean, you can see yourself there. Can you share a little bit about how you your research and the places that you see? I mean, there must be some kind of secret technique that allows us to actually be with you or be with your characters in these books.
Well, you have to have, first of all, you have to have your filling fall out and go to the dentist in Boulogne-Billancourt. And then actually, I became so enamored of passing by, going to the metro to, by the studio. I finagled my friend to try and apply for film, TV show tickets for that they were filming, and so I said, let's go to the show. And the website was complicated. So my friend Francoise said, well, I can help you. So she helped me order the tickets so we could, it didn't cost money, but to be in the audience, because I've never been on a French TV show in the audience. And when Francoise was booking it, she said, Cara, are you sure you really want to go to this show? This TV show? I said, yeah, because I can go. It's, I have to go this time. That's the only, she said, are you really sure? And she said, I wouldn't go. And I go, Francois, it's research. I just want to be in the room. I want to be in there. I want to go in the actual film studio. And so we got the tickets. We went in. And I can see why she said that, because it was this incredible talk show with this obnoxious, racist host that was hugely popular, which was just beyond kind of my comprehension. But it was, and my friend was going, we're listening to this racist talk show. What are we doing here? And anyway, so I mean, I enjoyed the experience. I didn't really, pay much attention to what, he was going on about. But as I walked out, I saw these huge posters of Jean Gabin, who'd, worked, who'd filmed in that studio. And I went, yes, this is why I came. But sometimes you go through a lot to get one teeny piece, but that piece is so can inform the story and make it alive. I think research, especially in this story, I looked at a lot of documentation by people who, who wrote journals, who wrote diaries after the war, what it was like. I knew a woman who, her name is Denise, and in my book, I dedicate the book to her memory. She passed last year. And I've known Denise since my first book, Murder in the Marais. She was an invaluable resource because she lived in Paris during the occupation, and afterwards, her parents never came back. And she provided me invaluable details, what she talked about, how they lived, what it meant when you wore a yellow star on the street, and how she said sometimes she would just put her lapel over it even though that would be punishable by imprisonment. Who knew? I also feel that it's important to hear people talk about those experiences. And I'm sorry, my husband was putting the garbage away there, so of course he has to do it right now, but sorry. But I think it's talking to people, it's looking at, diaries, it's listening to newsreels, it's, film. I love watching film. I watched one of the classic films that were made at the studio during the war, when the studio was run through the German collaboration. They made 3 films a year. Amazing. And they got around the Germans and they made classic films. And when I read a story that Bertrand Tavernier, the director and critic and film producer, and wrote about this time, he said he knew that they were using pieces of wood that they found on the street that no one had taken for firewood to build the set. They were, using whatever ribbon to hold it together. I mean, they were making do with nothing because of the deprivations. But those kinds of details, you've just got to hunt around, and also you've got to go explore the area to walk there different times, like early in the morning, at sunset, at night, to get a feel of the place. Because if you take away the people, you're in that place, and there's something about it that speaks to me and can speak to you.
So that's incredible because you really, as those of us who've read many of your books, you recreate the identity of a place, and it's fascinating to read, and the detail. It's very, and I think we talked about this the last time we spoke, was about it's cinematic the way you write. You can see and feel what you're reading, and that's magical, and thank you for that. So I had, before I ask you a what's next question, I had one more question just because I want to make sure we have time to answer questions from your audience. So given all of your Aimée Leduc novels, how did writing a standalone novel differ?
Oh, it was
and
very
and
different.
is Huguette going to continue on, or is she just a one? Is that it's
Renee, I don't know about Huguette. I can't really answer that right now. But it was really great to to um to flex my muscles to write something a bit different. At first, this story started out as I was thinking, okay, here's this young woman, she's been wronged, and excuse me, Jim, could you please turn the water off? Thank you. He's got to do the dishes. But so I thought, this injustice against her, and well, it's about revenge, and I watched The Bride Wore Black, I believe, with the wonderful Jean Moreau, and I thought, yes, it's all about revenge and getting it right. And I just sort of realized that I don't know, as I got to know Huguette more and give her different difficulties, and as one of the characters says in the story, revenge sucks your soul. And do I really want that for her? This young 17-year-old girl has her life ahead of her, and if she can make something with it. And I hadn't written that kind of story before. This is really Huguette's journey. Of course, there's crime and there's murder and there's secrets, like in my crime novels. But this was about her, maybe more character driven, because it's about Huguette, it's about the man she falls in love with, it's about her growth, her change, her discoveries, and discovery about things in herself, which was different for me, I will say that. But that happened as I started writing the story, and I got really interested in perhaps more character driven, her journey. How will she change? What will she do? What mistakes will she make? What will she do to deal with that? And she makes a lot of mistakes. And I don't know, I've always learned, I mean, I hope I learned from my mistakes, but that's somewhere that you're facing, and you can learn from it, or you can deny it. You can deny it for a while until it hits you in the face. So it was really interesting to bring that out in her character for me. Different.
and she doesn't look back until she does. So on the next, so in order to, we want to hear. I think we have some questions in the chat, but I think all of us are afterward. Everyone's going to be on the edge of your seat reading this book. But what's next? Is there something in the works that we can look forward to?
Yes, and thank you for asking, because yesterday, on the launch day, I signed a contract for the next book. So it's called, tentative title is Leduc Detective. So we're going to go back to Aimée Leduc, but in a different way. It'll be, as of now, of course, I haven't fully written it yet, but I was in Paris researching, but it deals with 2004, when Amy's working at the detective agency and her daughter Chloe is now 5 years old. And then we're dealing with a different timeline, 1968, when Claude Leduc, who's in Huguette, is still running the agency. And it's 1968 during the May riots in the Sorbonne. And so that's two different timelines, and things will come together with those two different timelines. So that's all I could say. But I loved going back to Claude because we see him in Huguette, he's a young man, and I can't say too much without giving spoilers, but
Mm.
we get to see him again. A
All
lot of
right, so now we've learned so much about this book. We've learned so much about you and how you write and how you research. So let's see. We have 23 comments in the chat. Let's see. Hang on. Wait a second. All right, so to someone, this is from Steve Elstein. To someone new to Cara Black books, where do you suggest I start? I would want to read it in French.
The books in French are translated are Murder in the Marais and Murder in the Sentier. Those are the only two that are in French. So I would read Murder in the Marais first because it's the first book, and then Murder in the Sentier. And if you're a World War II buff, and you want to read in English, I would, suggest 3 Hours in Paris, where we have another character who is a female American sniper.
Thank you. So from Barb, just a comment based on your comment on being able to write a check or have a checking account. Barb is saying married American women in the U.S. could not have their own credit card until 1974. Just an interesting.
Wow. Well, I believe it. I believe it. I believe it.
Hang on a second. These are just lots of comments. Do your books have to be read in order?
Well, that's a really good question. And I've answered it this way before. So when I've gone through an airport and I don't have anything to read and I go there and I pick up a book and it looks great and I picked it up and I start reading it and I love it. And then I look on the back flap, it's number 6 in the series. I'm like, oh, and then I think, well, okay, I mean, this book stood on its own. I love the characters. I want to go back in that world, but I have all those other 5 books I can go back to and sort of meet this world again. So I start to think of it that way, that you can start anywhere in the series because hopefully each book stands alone as a book. Granted, the detective series are, are a series. And Aimée is at different, she has different stages in her life, different relationships, but each one should stand alone. And then if you look behind me, you can see where those covers of my books are in different parts of Paris. I say if you're going to go into Montparnasse, why don't you read Murder Below Montparnasse? Or you're going to Montmartre, and you're going to stay in Montmartre. That's also a way to look at it. But it's kind of up to you. Some people want to start at Murder in the Marais and go through all 21 books. That's fine with me. Or if you want to sort of read World War II, very action oriented, you could read those. Again, Huguette, you don't have to have read anything else. She stands alone.
Cindy is asking, have any of your books been made into a screenplay?
They've been optioned by Hollywood or TV shows, Canadian film. So option means they rent the rights, to come up with a screenplay, to find development money or stars or, all these. I don't speak Hollywood, so I don't know, but there's a whole thing. They're really, I guess, trying to get funds and star power. So it's been optioned by several companies over the years. I don't know if anyone came up with the screenplay. It was not shared with me if they had or outlines. But so far, nothing yet.
Nothing yet. I just have a quick one. Is there any way, we've had lots of questions about reading your books in order. Can you buy, is there a set that you can buy of these books? It's just sort of a.
No, you just have to buy them individually.
Just buy them all. Okay, I was just curious because some,
Yeah.
and then
the order, and if you want to know the order, it's on my website,
okay.
carablack.com. They're all here too. I mean, I don't know, you can't really see it because of my,
Okay.
but in the cover of the book, I mean, there is an order if you want to read that. That's totally fine.
Perfect. And we spoke about the book's being read on Audible. You have a wonderful reader, don't you, on who reads for you on Audible?
Yes, Corinne Montalban. She is half French, half American, kind of like Aimée. She's an actress, actor, and she has narrated most of the Aimée Leduc books. And so she's narrating Huguette, and I got to pick, and between her and a few others, we do get to pick. And of course, I picked her because I love the way she pronounces the French words correctly. I got to meet her in person in Florida when I was on book tour about 2 years ago, when she was acting in repertory theater, and she's delightful. And I really enjoyed her as a person, and I think she does a great job with the new.
It's so important to have a great voice for
Yeah.
Audible. All right, so Heidi Lee is asking, Cara, I have imagined people who could play the characters. I guess she's assuming that this would be a film, but wondering who you would cast. I almost don't want your books to be made into movies.
I, there's so many young French actresses who I don't know. During different periods over the years, I thought of different actresses. I think she'd need to be tall. She'd need to have big eyes and great cheekbones, and be willing to go with me to the flea market to find some vintage clothes. And then I would say her, she's perfect.
All right, so you know who that is. I'm just seeing one of the stars right now in French cinema is Anne Girardot, who is exactly as you have just described. I just saw her in a film. She's high cheekbone. I mean, you never know if anybody's tall unless you research that, and it's not always the case with French women. But take a look at her. She's just
What's her name? Spell it.
Anne Girardot, Girardot. She's in a bunch of new films, and boy, if that's your character, that's who it is.
Is she any relation to the actress Annie Girardot? The,
It's Annie, yeah, the same one.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Great.
beautiful. So let's see if Melissa, do we see any more questions? Oh, a wonderful comment. I love that you focused on Aimée's grandfather because he is such a huge influence on her memories.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of people, and that's a great insightful comment. I appreciate that. And a lot of people love Claude. They've always said, "When's he coming back?" And I go, "Well, let's have an origin story." I love Claude too. I think, he's my French grandfather. And but yeah, I mean, Aimée grew up, well, I mean, when her mother left at 8, they moved in with him. And so he influenced her a lot. And I think we know a lot more. If you've ever wondered about Claude and having a mistress and being married and having Jean-Claude, Aimée's father, I think you're going to find out something in this story that might be really interesting to know how that dynamic plays out, because it gives a lot of origin to the family relationships, to the family structure of the Leducs.
Well, I think you've motivated us all if we haven't read most of them, we're going to start over and listen to them and read them. Melissa, do we have a slide on how best to order the book?
Yes, in fact, I've just put all of the links in the chat to order on bookshop.org. And we also put in the link to Amazon's editors' picks, the best literature and fiction books of December, where Huguette is featured.
Thank you. Yeah, and there's a special on the Kindle, if you have a Kindle, which looks great. And I was very pleased to be chosen by Amazon. And I know Françoise, my friend, is here. I wish she would poke her head out and say hello, because but she might be a bit shy. But Françoise, hello, and I can't wait to see you again in April. And thank you so much for all your help in my story. Francois was kind of my go-to Boulogne-Billancourt person, and always up for a walk, to try something, and really a good pal on those hikes around Boulogne-Billancourt.
So I see, is it Françoise Poisson?
Yes.
She's here, but she's hidden behind the spelling of her name, and her sound is off. So anyway, so I think I want to thank you so much, Cara. I think everybody is going to be buying this book for a Christmas read, a holiday read. It's an edge of your seat, wonderful story, amazing story. And I hope everybody really enjoys it. And we're so grateful to have you with us, and now so encouraged that there'll be a next time.
Oh, well, thank you, Renee, for having me back, and Melissa and Upi and all of you in the AF USA. You know, it's always been a huge support, and I just love talking with you because it's great to be among fellow Francophiles, you know, the tribe. So
we're very grateful. We wish you bonne fête, and we look forward to hearing more about your next project and sharing it with you with AF USA. So thank you so much.
thank you, everyone. Thank you, Renee. Thank
Thank you.
you. À tout à l'heure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.